Hello everybody, this is 8-Bit Flashback, and today I'm going to do a tour of my game room, which is also my office and studio. My game room is only 9 foot by 11 foot, so I'm not quite able to fit my entire collection here, but I try to utilize it as good as I can. One of my favorite hobbies is collecting retro games, but I also like collecting retro toys and electronics, and even modern video games. So, it's time to nerd out. So I have a decent sized collection. It's not the biggest collection out there, but I got some cool stuff. And I've been collecting stuff like this since I was a little kid. A lot of stuff I had to sell over the years and then buy it back, but right now this is probably the biggest collection I've ever had. I'm constantly hunting for retro stuff at pawn shops, thrift stores, and swap meets, so it seems like every month that goes by, I have to figure out how to add a new shelf to my room. So let's start off with my Nintendo shelf, and I have every US Nintendo starting from the original one from 1985, all the way to Nintendo Switch from March of 2017. And check this out, this is a Logitech Game Saver for Super Nintendo games. And I plan on doing some retro reviews for certain products from the 90s and 80s, and this will be one of the products I will be doing a review on here in the future. And here's a RetroGen adapter for your Super Nintendo, and what this allows you to do is play Sega Genesis games on your Super Nintendo. And I'll be doing a review for this in the near future too. And here's a look at my Nintendo 64 with an import copy of Banjo-Kazooie. And I'm able to play import games using a Game Shark cartridge. And here's my GameCube with one of my favorite Transformers on top, the original Optimus Prime. And here's a look at my Wii, and I've got a custom decal set on here to resemble the original Nintendo. And here's the Wii U. And here's my Nintendo Switch that's got a custom decal set that resembles the Super Famicom. And here's some PlayStation stuff. I got the original PSP, I got a PSP clone, the original PlayStation with Cycle on top from GoBots. We got a PlayStation 2 Slim, and the original PlayStation 2. And I've also got the PlayStation 3 up above here, right here. And do you guys remember the jailbreak for PlayStation 3? This is how you used to hack your PlayStation back in the day. I think I bought this in December of 2009 for like 25 bucks. And about exactly 1 month later, GeoHot, a famous hacker, announced a way to exploit the PlayStation 3 for free. And here's some of my miniature consoles. I got a couple Nintendos there, one of them with a cartridge mod. And here is a 3D printed PC Engine, and this is the actual size of the original. And this is a completely functional console with working NFC hue cards. And here's my mini TurboGrafx 16, and it's exactly half scale of the original, along with a mini PC Engine that's also at half scale. And here's a look at some of my mini Super Nintendos, and this particular one right here is 3D printed with a functional cartridge. And I also have a case made by Kentaro, and another one by Base Top. Now let's move down to the next shelf, and that's where my Nintendo Switch is, and I got my 30th anniversary Mario Amiibo. I got my mini Super Nintendo PAL case that's made by Kentaro. Also, I got a couple miniature arcades there. I got my OG ST N64 Odroid case. And I do have an upcoming Odroid Dreamcast case that I 3D printed, but it's not quite done yet. And here's a look at some of the stuff I used to build my miniature consoles, and I've got all kinds of wires and adapters and custom connections. And some real handy wires to have when you're working on smaller electronics like these miniature consoles is DuPont wires, and I've got a whole mess of those. Also a hot glue gun, a soldering gun, and a mini Dremel come in very handy when you're working on smaller electronics. Here's my Sony TV that I tested out all my consoles on. I got a bunch of different controllers, a bunch of different AV connections, a whole mess of AC adapters, and a lot of different SCART cables for various different retro systems. And here's a look at my Sega Shell. So I got my Sega Saturn that's modded with an action replay cartridge so I can play backups. Got my Sega Dreamcast Black Sports Edition. Got my original Dreamcast from launch day, September 9th, 1999. I got it at KB Toy Store, which no longer exists. And sitting on top there is my miniature Dreamcast, along with a couple prototypes on the side. And here's a couple different Sega Genesis miniatures, and that front one is actually a Transformer, and I've done a special mod for that, and I will be doing a video about that. And here's a look at the original Sega Genesis Model 1 with an EverDrive cartridge so I can play pretty much every game. Here's my Game Gear that's double stacked with Game Genie and a TV tuner on top, and I've done a special mod for this too. I've actually turned it into a smart TV where I can watch Hulu and Netflix on this. And that's another thing I will be releasing a video about. Here's a look at the microphone that I use for most of my videos. This is the Blue Yeti, and this is kind of an entry-level microphone, but I haven't had any issues with it, and it seems to work great. And for a desk, I'm actually using a retro desk from the 80s, and this is just like the desk I used to use when I was in elementary school. But I have done a couple mods to it. I glued a new top on it so it's wider, and I extended the legs so it actually fits me. I found this desk at a thrift store, and it immediately flooded all kinds of memories back from when I was in elementary school, and I just had to have this. Here's a look at some of my Atari stuff. I got Pong from the early 70s, the Atari Lynx, Atari Flashback, and the Atari 2600. Along with the very first video game I ever played on a console, Donkey Kong, which also introduced me to Mario, aka Jumpman, at the same time. Here's a look at my Odyssey 2 that I just picked up and just got on my shelf, and I got this for 30 bucks along with 14 games. It even includes the voice adapter, and I haven't even tested this thing out yet, but I'll probably make a video when I do. This Quest for the Rings game is actually a half board game, half video game, and it looks really cool, and I'm excited to test it out. And here's the CD player from the early 80s, which was really uncommon to have back then, and this thing still works great. And located over here in the corner is my Davinci 3D printer. This is where I print a lot of my 3D miniature consoles and various other projects. 3D printers are nice and very handy to have, but there is a lot of maintenance involved to keep these up and running. And if you're looking for a product with a professional finish, there's a lot of extra work involved, such as priming and painting. But if you're looking for a hobby, there's a lot of incredible things you can make with a 3D printer. And located over here on the far wall, I have a green screen that's on a custom spool I made, so I can just pull down my green screen whenever I need it. And I will be doing a video about how to make a green screen on my other channel, which is a construction channel, CLS All-in-One. And now that I have a permanent green screen set up, I'll probably be doing a lot more green screen shots. Okay, on to the next shelf, and right here I have a Masterpiece Transformer, and the Masterpiece series have a lot of extra detail on them. And underneath that is my Xbox 360, along with some of my favorite games in the back there, such as Rainbow Six Vegas. There's the original Xbox, not to be confused with the Xbox One. There's my Super Nintendo 3DS, my original 3DS, and a bunch of different Game Boys. And I just found this original Game Boy at a pawn shop for only 17 bucks. And here's a couple more miniature consoles. I got some Nintendo and Super Nintendo Classic Editions. And if you're looking for a collectible for your Nintendo Classic Edition, r.o.b the robot makes a very cool addition. This is an amiibo, and speaking of amiibos, I do have a mod coming up where I'm going to make amiibos work with a retro console. And I haven't decided which console it's going to be yet. It might be the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. And here's my Sega Cd. I just picked this up on eBay for 40 bucks as is, and unfortunately it doesn't work, but I will be doing a repair video on this on how to fix it here in the near future. Here's a look at my Sega Megadrive Model 2 that's actually been modded with a Sega Genesis Flashback HD inside of it. And there's a look at Retron 3 that plays 3 different systems. You can play Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Nintendo. And here's a look at some of my older retro toys. We got some He-Man and Transformers. And we got a couple newer Transformers in the mix there too. And here's another one of my favorite Transformers, Soundwave. And off to the right of him here is a newer version of Soundwave from the Cybertron series. And on the left of him is Blaster from the Cybertron series. And I also have a couple mini cons. This is Ravage, and he's actually a mini cassette that ejects out of the chest of Soundwave. And over here is the Cybertron version of Ravage, and he actually transforms into our hard disk drive that ejects out of the chest of Soundwave. And located underneath these guys, I got some various different posters, including some stuff about Atari, Super Nintendo, Nintendo, some various different toys, and more. And located on my very top shelf, I have a couple giant Transformers. I have the Omega Prime and the Ultimate Bumblebee. And both of these stand at well over a foot tall. Also on the top shelf, I got various different boxes for different systems, including this virtual reality vest from the 90s that's designed for retro systems like the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Nintendo. And I haven't even tested this yet, but when I do, I'm going to make a video about it because I think it'll make a really cool retro review. Alright everyone, it's that time again. It's time for me to go. If you like that video, please click that like button. If you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. And if you want to help support the channel, you can now find me on Facebook and Patreon. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.